Just bear with me. Yes, let's quickly go to the next slide. I'm sure last time I told you that the first, I think, 5 chapters we dealt with was we had to like move away from when Moses left them and gave them a farewell speech and headed straight to in the plains of Moab, and from there Joshua took over after he passed on. Moses passed on, and they crossed Jordan River and encamped in Gilgal. I've already mentioned what happened in Gilgal. You're supposed to know that by now. Minor stopped from raining. They had their first Passover. All people who left Egypt, the males were circumcised. I hope we still remember all of that. And all the stones they were carrying from Jordan, they made a remembrance there, or rather, a monument in Gilgal, the 12 stone that they had in and their base for to fight all the wars was gonna be in Gilgal. Wherever they go, they were gonna come back to Gilgal. That's where everybody else was, including old people, children, and all that. So now, after Gilgal, the first thing, the first place they had to go to, or the beginning of the wars, was the Battle of Jericho. So in this series, I'm dealing with 3 major campaigns. Others are minor campaigns, I would call them that. The Battle of Jericho, the Battle of Ai, the Battle for Gibeon. Just note the difference. The Battle of Jericho, the Battle of Ai, and the battle for Gibeon, not against Gibeon. So let's go ahead. Pitting. Let me at the same time open this presentation from my side so that I should be able to. We know what happened. We can skip that slide because I'm going to rush it a little bit. Unlike usual, normally I would go through it in detail and we'll discuss that, but I don't think we have the time today to do that. So we know what happened before they could. Joshua could embark on a campaign to destroy Jericho. He sent 2 spies to gather intelligence. They left Shittim. If you remember, Shittim was on the other side of Jordan, because the first place they encamped in after crossing Jordan was Jericho. They left Shittim while they were still on the other side of Jericho. While they were there, they stayed in Jericho. They stayed with Rahab, a prostitute, but unfortunately their cover was blown, and the king of Jericho ordered his agents to search for them. Rahab hid them from king of Jericho in return for their promise of protection for her and her family during the Israelite invasion. Then she led them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the outer side of the city wall, and she resided within the wall itself. She said to them, "Go towards the hill country, so that the pursuers may not come upon you. Hide yourself there for 3 days until the pursuers have returned, and afterwards you may go on your way." They advised her to put a rope on the wall so that when Joshua's armies come through to destroy the city, the soldiers should know which house to spare, because the Lord instructed Israel to destroy everything in that city. And after taking an advice from Rahab, they arrived safely in the camp to give Joshua a full report of their adventure. Immediately, there were some portions which I had to skip because we don't have, we cannot include each and every detail. The king of Jericho, when he had that they were hiding in Rahab's place, she went in there. Rahab didn't deny the fact that 2 Hebrew men came through. He said, "Yes, I knew, I saw them, they came through, but they left, and I didn't even know what was their mission and stuff like that." But in the meantime, if you read that chapter, the whole of it, you read it on your own. It's Joshua chapter 2, verse 1 to 14. He hid them in the upper or in the ceiling. I think she had a lot of material like your garments and your clothes and all that. She hid them somewhere there, and they stayed there up until they knew that the coast was clear. And later on, that's when she dropped them off by the rope. And the same rope, after they have made a promise to her that we're not gonna destroy you and your household. But since it would be a war and there would be a lot of what can I say? I'm looking for a proper word to use. Then we will be all over the place. We wouldn't necessarily come your way because there will be a lot of confusion. Rather, put the very same rope that you used to you gave us to go down with, to use it, so that we should be able to identify your place with it, and we'll tell Joshua and the elders. And that's what exactly what they did. So here is a picture, as I'm just telling you, letting them down by the rope. You can see down the wall, because the house was on top of the wall, or rather close to the wall. So it was safer. It was a safe option for them to be in that house, because had it been in the middle of the city, it was just going to be another trouble. Yeah. Let's continue. Let's continue. Yes. I'm just going to give you a picture what Jericho looked like. The name Jericho itself means a place of fragrance. Fragrance, we know it's perfumes or anything close to that. It was a fenced city in the midst of vast grove of palm trees in the plain of Jordan, over against the place where the river was crossed. Remember, immediately after they've crossed Jordan, they reached Gilgal, and afterwards it was Jericho. So it was very close to the river Jordan itself. It was the most important city in the Jordan Valley. You'll read the book of Numbers chapter 22, 1 verse 1, and Numbers 34 verse 15, and the strongest fortress in the land of Canaan. We all know what a fortress is. It's a city that impenetrable city that cannot be invaded, because maybe they have put fortifications like your high walls. Good as it may seem, but unfortunately the city was accursed, or rather cursed, and all the inhabitants and the spoil of the city were to be destroyed. Only silver and gold and the vessels of brass and iron were reserved and put into the treasury of the house of Jehovah. So the rest of the things were to be destroyed, and no one was supposed to take anything for themselves. Usually when there's war, soldiers are given the spoils of war for themselves, but this time around, it wasn't like that. They were told to destroy everything except silver and gold, which also they were not supposed to take them for themselves, but rather they were meant for the house of God. So if you see this and you try and do your research, according to modern times, this was at least, they were 13 feet or 4 meters in height. Think of 4 meters height. It's quite long. It's quite a long wall. And in between, there would be watchtowers. These are for the soldiers to be able to see the incoming enemy and stuff like that, which were 28 feet tall and were intended to protect the settlement and its water supply from human intruders. Those who do not know, old cities always had to be built around the river or a water source. Actually, the easiest way of killing a population way back then, even today, is by cutting the water supply. It only takes a day or so. I mean, you who have experienced water shortage one way or the other, you know one day alone is frustrating. 2 days becomes, it's a disaster in making. And a week, we don't even want to go a week or more than that. We know it already puts everybody's is agitated, and nobody's happy about that. So that's why they always have to protect water sources and all that. There were no dams way back then, but they have to be close to a big water source. And I think in this case, it was Jordan, so that the city should be able to get its source of life from water. Yes, we can go to now this is the plan to attack Jericho. We've read about it many times in the Bible. God commanded Israel that in 6 days they should compass the city once a day, meaning every day. Let's start from Sunday up until the Sabbath day. Sunday, they have to go around the city once. But in the 6 days, no one was supposed to make any form of noise. And in fact, no one was supposed to even talk at all. So for 6 days, they were expected to march in total silence. And on the seventh day, they were instructed to encompass the city on 7 times this time around. Still silent. The priest would blow the horns, and also the whole nation, 7 priests, not just nation, would be instructed to scream. That's when they would only speak when they are told to speak. That's when they were told, after the priests have blown the trumpets, that they should scream, and thereafter take the city by storm, because the walls would come tumbling down. Yeah. Next slide, please. Now, the chapter of Joshua, chapter 6, it illustrates how what was the order of battle, or how they were supposed to stand. Soldiers were supposed to be at the front, followed by the 7 priests with their 7 horns, and behind the 7 priests it was the Ark of Covenant and the Levites who were bearing it. Everything who were carrying it rather. After everything was done in accordance with Joshua's instruction, the city fell by the edge of the sword, and only Rahab and her household were spared. Remember how she got spared. She left that robe as a sign, so that whenever the armies of Israel see their house with the robe after the walls have fallen down, they should know that's the house where they should go in and fetch the inhabitants. Those are the only inhabitants who were not marked for destruction. So no one was allowed, as I have already said, no one was allowed to take anything from the city. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was known throughout all the country. That was after the destruction of the city. Let's go to the next. Can you hear me? Hello? We'll go, yes. We'll go into after the Jericho was conquered by storm. The second assignment of the children of Israel was the city called Ai, which means a heap of ruins in Hebrew. So after Israel destroyed Jericho, both their morale and confidence were quite high, obviously, because Jericho was one of the strongest nations in the in the Jordan Valley. Their trust on Joshua's leadership was unquestionable and absolute. Their next assignment in their quest to conquer Canaan was a small city called Ai, which I've already said means the land, a heap of ruins. Such was the morale of Israel that they thought they could take Ai with one hand tied in their back, but it wasn't going to be. Little did they know that someone had broken God's law by stealing the precious but accursed stuff from the cursed city of Jericho, thus inadvertently putting the entire congregation under a curse spell. And as usual, Joshua sent up spies to gather intelligence about the city. When they returned to Joshua, they said, not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not Do not be weary the whole army, for only a few people live there. It was a small army. It was a small city from what the spies told Joshua. So there was no need for Joshua to send the entire army to go and fight over there. So, but unfortunately, the children of Israel, after the Jericho war, they didn't know that somebody broke God's law. Remember, I've already stated that God said to them that they should not take anything at all, and it's only and everything has to be destroyed except the ornaments of silver, gold, and brass, and even those ones are supposed to be put in the Lord's coffers. But unfortunately, somebody did something that affected everybody in a bad way. Let's continue. So about 3,000 men went up, but they were routed. A rout is when you try to run away. There's a certain way an army is supposed to retreat in a war, in case maybe you are defeated in battle, or what we call an orderly retreat. You don't just run. You have a rear guard. As soon as somebody realizes that it's not your day and you should run away to fight another day, they organize what we call a rear guard. A rear guard are those people who will keep the incoming army of the enemy very busy, fight them, while the army is retreating in order. But a rout, as I say, it's when everybody just retreat in a disorderly way. Everybody tries to save their lives. So it's about but they were routed in and about 36 of them killed. They chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as some stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. Then Joshua tore his clothes, fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there still till evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. You know the mourning procedure the Israelites usually follow way back then in the days when things were bad. They would embark on a fast, wear a sackcloth, and then really show fat faces and put sand on their heads. And this is what they did, except the fasting part of it. Joshua prayed and inquired from the Lord God, and the Lord God told him that someone stole a cast material from Jericho. Hence his wrath fell upon Israel, and he decided to punish them by making them suffer defeat in the hands of their enemies. Achan was the culprit. He was the son of Carmi. He stole a robe of Babylonian made, 200 shekels of silver, as well as a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels. Those are the ancient measurement units in Israel. 50 shekels, I don't know how much it is. I never did my homework on that one. But he hid them in the ground inside his tent. After his confession, then Joshua, together with all of Israel, took Achan, the son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the gold, and his sons and daughters, his cattle, donkeys, and sheep, his tent, and all that he had, to the valley of Achor, and stoned him to death. Afterwards, they burned everything and heaped large pile of rocks. Thus the chaos was purged from the Israel camp. So for them to be able to be cleansed again, God commanded Joshua that he should destroy the culprit as well as his family. The sad thing is that the children who didn't know anything about that were also affected. They also got the punishment of their father, as the second commandment says that I, the Lord, visit the iniquities of the fathers upon the children of the second and third generation of them who hates me. So that's what exactly happened. And if you read that chapter, they left a monument which they say to this day still remains, where he was burned, and after stoning him, they burned everything, him and his animals and everyone. They burned everyone else and everything there, and also heaped stones, and then they say they still remain there in the valley of Achor. Now that the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid. Now, obviously after this, they're supposed to retake Ai because it's on their way. So the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid, not be dismayed. Take all the people of war with you and arise, go up to Ai. See, I've given into your hand the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. And you shall do to Ai and his king as you did to Jericho and his king. Only its spoils and his cattle you shall take as a booty for yourselves. Lay ambush for the city behind it. That's Joshua chapter 8, verse 1 to 2. So Joshua chose 30,000 men of valor and sent them away by night. You usually, in war, they usually use the cover of darkness all the time to conceal their movement, to conceal their whereabouts. So he sent them by night immediately so that they should lay around the walls of Ai, because the vision is not that good at night. So 30,000 men moved stealthily close to the city, and the remainder of the army was with Joshua himself. They divided the troops into two groups, and the main army was commanded to set an ambush behind the city. Joshua and the rest of the army would approach the city and will come about when they come out against him at first, that they would flee before them to lure them away from the city. The plan was that Ai army should come out after them till they had drawn them from the city, for they will say, they are fleeing before us, as they did in the first time when we encountered them. Therefore we will flee before them. When they were very far away from the comfort of the city, that army which was laying close to the city, which was hidden, would rise and enter the city and destroy it. And the army that pursued Israel would, the Ai army, which was pursuing Israel, would be trapped between two armies now. Because immediately when the main army, which was commanded by someone else, entered the city, they will slay the inhabitants and everyone else, because the city didn't have defense at all. And when they see the smoke smoldering and stuff like that, they will turn back and see that the city is under attack. But by that time, it's too late. They would be trapped in the pincer movement, between two armies, Joshua approaching now, and then the army that just destroyed the city. So even if God was giving them victory, they still have to think, they still have to plan, they still have to be strategic. So this was the plan that Joshua came up with. They don't say God showed him in a vision or anything like that, but he was a thinker, he was a general. He was talented in warfare. So he came up with that stratagem, that knowing that psychologically Ai is on a high mood. They're going around telling people that they've defeated the mighty army of Israel, which destroyed Jericho. So as soon as Israel appear again, they would just try and pursue them again, thinking that they're going to score the same victory, but it wasn't meant to be. So that's what exactly happened. Everything went according to the plan, and Ai, and just like Jericho before it, was utterly destroyed and conquered. 12,000 men, women, and children were killed. Their king was hanged on a tree. The city was burnt to the ground. Thus, Israel's confidence was totally restored. That's how the battle unfolded. Israel was able to avenge its defeat. So here we have an illustration. You can see Joshua standing here, while the rest of the army, you can't see the rest of the army, but luring away the Ai army so that it should follow them. And they were going to run as hard as possible so that they should move away from their little city. And when the other army, which was waiting in ambush, realized that the Ai army is very far away, then they would enter a defenseless city, because all its men were running after the children of Israel, and they would destroy everything. And when they had destroyed everything, the very same army, when they see that there's smoke and stuff, maybe the screaming and stuff like that, when they try to turn back, they would realize that they're between two armies. The one that's led by Joshua and the one that's already inside the city. So Joshua had already fought 2 campaigns, was victorious. All the kings of Canaan around that area heard about all what God had done for Israel and how they subdued the city of Ai and Jericho. So there were different Canaanite nations, and one of them was called Gibeon. In case you didn't know, I'm just emphasizing this. Gibeonites are not Israelites. Gibeonites are Canaanites. Originally, they are Canaanites. But this will, when we go through this, we will know as to how they ended up being part of the Israel multitudes. And it came to pass when all the kings who were on the side of Jordan, in the hills and in the lowland and in the coasts of Great Sea towards Lebanon, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hittites, and the Jebusites heard about it, meaning the destruction of Ai and Jericho. They gathered together to fight with Joshua and Israel with one accord. That's covered in the whole chapter of Joshua, chapter 9. But some of the things, obviously, we don't take them directly from the Bible. Gibeon, which was the strongest of these Canaanite nations, were extremely afraid and devised a plan to deceive Joshua to save themselves from destruction. Remember, God's law was saying that whichever nation fight against you, you should destroy everything. So the Gibeonites, when they realized that they stand no chance against Israel, they decided to come up with a plan. Oh, sorry, before I even continue with this, please note, when they were fighting in Jericho, God told them not to take anything. But when I was dealing with the Ai campaign, God told them to take the spoils of war. I hope you have noted that. Jericho, they were not supposed to take anything. In Ai, they were supposed to take the spoils of war for themselves this time around. So yeah, but let's continue with this. That's what I wanted to emphasize. So Gibeon, which was the strongest of the Canaanite nation, was extremely afraid and devised a plan to deceive Joshua to save themselves from destruction. You'll see in Joshua chapter 9, verse 4-6, they worked craftily and went and pretended to be ambassadors, and they took all sacks of their donkeys, all wineskins torn and mended, old and patched sandals on their feet, old garments on themselves, and the bread of their provision was dry and moldy. And they went to Joshua to the camp at Gilgal and said to him and to the men of Israel, we have come from a far country. Now therefore make a covenant with us. And Joshua said unto them, who are you and where do you come from? So they said to him, from a very far country, your servants have come because of the name of the Lord your God. For we have heard of his fame and all that he did in Egypt and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, who was at Ashtaroth. Therefore, your elders and all the inhabitants of our country spoke to us, saying, take provision with you for the journey and go and meet with them. And say to them, we are your servants. Now, therefore, make a covenant with us. That's Joshua 9 to chapter 9, verse 11. So Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them leave. And the rulers of the congregation saw unto them and told them that, no, we promise you, and we're not going to do anything to you because you're not even in this neighborhood. You come far. We only meant to fight and destroy these people around, not people who are far away from us. We have a list of nations God told us that we should subdue and totally destroy. Now, and it happened at the end of 3 days. After they had made a covenant with them, that they heard that they were their neighbors who dwelt near them. Their cities were Gibeon, Kephirem, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim, which were just 3 days away from Gilgal camp. Israel could not attack them because they had already made an agreement with them. So the congregation complained. Oh, Israel was bloodthirsty, complained against the rulers. Then all the rulers said to the congregation, we have sworn to them by the Lord God of Israel. Now, therefore, we may not touch them. We will let them live, lest the wrath of God come upon us because of the oath which we swore to them. Remember, in Israel, once you make an oath, you cannot go back on your word. You said, well, you have deceived us. So it means that the agreement is null and void. We are going to kill you all. No, it doesn't work that way. You have already made a promise to God and you cannot go back on your way. So Gibeon, seeing that they were also going to suffer the same fate of Jericho and the same fate of Ai, they decided to deceive Joshua. And if you read that chapter, Joshua wasn't supposed to take a hasty decision. He was supposed to inquire from the Lord and ask if these people were not deceiving him or not. Because each and every major decision you take, you're supposed to inquire from the Lord. But he didn't do that. So God told him after they've made an agreement that, look, there's nothing you can do about it. You're supposed to come first to me and you're going to get an answer, and this was not going to happen. But since you have already done this, there's nothing you can do about it. You are trapped with these people. So let's go ahead. So Joshua and company kept their word and did not destroy them as per his promise to them, but they were made third-grade citizens of Israel. They were responsible for menial jobs, degraded and unskilled tasks like wood cutting. Water fetching was going to be their lifetime preoccupation. So if you are from Gibeon and you love that name, know this is what it means to be a Gibeonite. And that day, as Joshua 9 verse 27 says, and that day Joshua made them wood cutters and water carriers for the congregation and for the altar of the Lord in the place which he could choose even to this day. So it means historically they were their slaves. They had no other option but to, as a punishment for not telling them the truth, they made them to be the servants. So it's illustrated in pictures that they came, you can see the clothes are tattered, and you look at Joshua and them, they are dignified, beautifully dressed and stuff like that. And these ones are kneeling. So they said from a very far country, when he asked them, we remember that, and they told him that, please make an agreement with us. And then they made an agreement with them, and they will be their servants. Now, what happened after that? That's why I say the third battle is not the battle against Gibeon, it's the battle for Gibeon. Remember now, after all this arrangement, Gibeon humbled themselves and were part of the Israelites. But even though by birth they were not Israelites, but they were given the task, low tasks like fetching water and cutting woods and all that. Now, anyone who touches Gibeon is launching a war against Joshua. So the 5 kings of Canaan, and when they had that Gibeon, who was their only hope, by the way, because they had a stronger army and more men of valor, had given themselves up to the children of Israel, they were angry or they were livid with them. They wanted to destroy Gibeon and teach it a lesson. So when the surrounded nations said that Gibeon made peace with Israel to be their servants, they were livid, like they were angry. And the 5 kings of Canaan made an alliance to launch war against Gibeon. So Gibeon was their hope initially Gibeon was their hope against the marauding Israel army. They were a great nation with big cities and had mighty men in their ranks. Therefore, the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, gathered together and went up, they and all, not some of their armies, and all their armies, and came before Gibeon and made war against it. When Gibeon heard that when they heard that they were afraid and felt helpless, they pleaded with Joshua to rescue them. So Joshua ascended from Gilgal. After Joshua inquired from the Lord, God told him that, no, go up and fight for your friends, because you cannot afford to abandon your friends. They are now your servants. So when Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he marched all night, he and all the people of war with him and the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said to Joshua, do not fear them, for I have delivered them into your hand. Not a man of them shall stand before you. Joshua chapter 10, verse 7 to 8. While the 5 kings were busy launching an attack, they were not expecting Joshua. Were busy launching an attack. They thought that they got Gibeon, and therefore it stood no chance. Because from where Gibeon was, Gilgal was a bit of a distance from them, even though it was not such a great distance. But they thought that by the time they are done with Gibeon, there's no way that Israel would find them in the battlefield still. But lo and behold, so Joshua ascended upon Gilgal, he and his people of war with him, and mighty valor already. While the 5 kings were busy launching an attack against Gibeon, Joshua therefore came upon them suddenly, having marched all night from Gilgal. So the Lord routed them before. Remember when I explained what's to route? It's to make sure that people are utterly defeated. They run in different directions, and they do not even have. They are not even. Their retreat is not even structured. So the Lord routed them before Israel, killed them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, chased them along the road that goes to Beth Horon, struck them down as far as Azekah and Makkedah. And it happened as they fled before Israel and were on the descent on Beth Horon, that the Lord cast down large hailstones from heaven on them as far as Azekah, and they died. There were more who died from the hailstones than the children of Israel killed with the sword. So the Lord was also fighting with Israel. As they were fighting these 5 kings and their armies, remember, look at it this way. They were busy fighting against Gibeon, not knowing that Joshua would march overnight and fall upon them. So it was a surprise attack. So as he fell upon them, they decided that they should beat a hasty retreat. But Israel kept on killing them, and they ran away. And as they were running away, God decided to cast large hailstones from heaven. And they say there were more who were killed by the hailstone than by the sword, that when compared to those who fell or who were killed by the sword of Israel. Now we still continue with the battle of Gibeon. And Joshua spoke to the Lord in that day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel, and he said, in the side of Israel, sun stand still over Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ayajalon. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped, till the people had revenge upon the enemies. This is not written in the book of Jasher. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and did not hasten to go down for about the whole day. And there has been no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord heeded the voice of men, for the Lord fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned, and Israel went with him to the camp at Gilgal. After their utter defeat, the 5 kings escaped and hid themselves in the cave in Makkedah. And Joshua was informed about it and commanded his men to put up stones on the mouth of the cave and guard them. Afterwards, Joshua commanded his men to take them out, and he killed them and hanged them up in 5 trees. Towards the evening, he commanded they be thrown into the cave they have been hiding, and a big boulder was shut in the entrance, and they say that boulder or that rock is still there to this day. So we have a song in Israel. I'm sure some know this, know it, they have heard it, even if they don't know the words, they just hear the melody. It says, do 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 do, he said 5 keys, ooh, out of their camps, he killed them one by one. They marched to the battle of, yeah. That's what exactly it's summarizing some of Joshua's campaign. So the biggest miracle that ever happened during the battle of Gibeon, I'm sure you've heard about it. And now, if ever your Sabbath school superintendent asks you, you would know why the sun stopped and the moon stopped in Ajalon. It was because Joshua was defending his friends. It was not his fight. He was defending Gibeon, which was attacked by its former five friends who were now enemies. and he went out there to defend it. And when he saw that the sun was about to, he was afraid that it was going to take long. He asked God, or he pleaded with God, that God should stop the sun, and the sun didn't move, so that he should fight against the the five kings of Canaan. And he utterly defeated them. But in Azekah, God made sure that he killed more of those people using hailstones. So we know now today that from that the when Joshua stopped the sun, it was not because he wanted to do it out of fun to show that he can tell the sun to stop, but it was simply because of he wanted to finish the battle. And God listened to him, and it was the first time such a thing happened. It would never happen again. Historical accounts, I still have to verify that now. They said that battle was fought on a Sabbath eve, like on a Friday. So he didn't want the Sabbath to come, or because the Sabbath comes at sunset, that the Sabbath should begin while they're still in the midst of the battle. Now you ask yourself, why would that happen? Because the wars were fought on any day, the Sabbath day included. And in fact, if you look at the Battle of Jericho, it was fought on the Sabbath day, it was fought on the seventh day. This was simply because, I hope you know this, and I know that people who would be able to know this, and they say simply, this was not their war, this was not their battle. If it was their battle, it was okay for it to prolong up until the following day. But this was a battle Joshua was using to defend his friend. But had it been their battle, it would have been okay for them to fight all day long up until the Sabbath day. So because when it came to that, God made exceptions. So we're about to finish. I didn't know that I was going to have so much time. After the slaughter of 5 kings, now we are dealing with the campaigns of Joshua, because I said from the beginning that this is dealing with the wars themselves. He went on to go and destroy Libnah, and after that, Lachish followed, Eglon followed. If you look at these names, these are the names of the very kings which followed, who were trying to fight Joshua. Debir followed. And if you go ahead, if you go into historical accounts of Israel, most of this, Lachish, Libnah, Eglon, Jerusalem, and all of that, those became part of the southern kingdom, which we call Judah and the land of the Benjaminites. So Joshua conquered all the land, the mountain country, and the south, and the lowland, and the wilderness slopes, and all their kings. He left none remaining, but utterly destroyed all that breath, as the Lord of Israel commanded. And Joshua conquered them from Kadesh Barnea as far as Gaza and the country of Goshen, even as far as Gibeon. All these kings and their land Joshua took at one time, because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned, and all Israel with him to the camp at Gilgal. You remember, I keep on saying that Gilgal was their base. So after every war, they would go back, march back to Gilgal. Whether they were defending the Gibeonites, they would go back to Gilgal. Whether they were in Ai, after fighting, go back to Gilgal. Fight Jericho, when they are done, they go back to Gilgal. Same applied here. After fighting Libnah, Lachish, Eglon, Debir, as well as killing the 5 kings, went back to Gilgal. And that part of the campaign of Canaan land was totally conquered, the southern land of Canaan land. And now other battle lands, and I think this would be this last slide, and thanks for giving me so much time. And it came to pass when King Jabin of Hazor heard that these things, that he sent to Jobab, meaning Jabin and Jobab, the king of Madon and the king of Hazor, and the king of Shimron and the king of Akshapar, and the kings who were from the north, in the mountains, in the plain of Chinneroth, and the lowland and the heights of Dor, or in the west, and the Canaanites in the east and in the west, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites in the mountains, and the Hivites below Hermon in the land of Mizpah. So they went out They all and their armies with them, as many people as the sand. You can tell there's are many, many nations that they say as many people as the sand that is on the seashore in multitude with very many horses. And when all these kings met together, they came and camped in the waters of Meron to fight against Israel. That's Joshua chapter 11, verse 1 to 5. I took it the way it is from the Bible. So they were smart. Unfortunately, they were up against God and his people. God and his people. They've heard what happened in the south, how the 5 kings and their lands were conquered, including Jericho and Ai. So instead of fighting a single battle or fighting as individuals, they decided to combine their efforts. They decided that all of these nations should come together and then fight against Joshua and Israel. Smart thinking. That's what you do. World War One, World War Two. World War One, Germany was defeated by an alliance of Britain, USA, France, as well as Italy, which we were called the Entente or Alliance. They combined their efforts and they were able to defeat Germany. Same applied in 1939 to 1945. They combined their efforts and they were able to overcome Nazi Germany under Hitler. That's why we have the big three, Germany, USA, as well as Britain. They all combined to fight against Hitler. So this was a smart idea, except the fact that they were up against the armies of the Lord. That wasn't going to work for them. And in the actual fact, if I have to put it this way, they were expediting or rather rushing their own destruction. Joshua was coming their way. They were not going to escape this. But by combining their armies and they all assembled in one place, they made sure that they brought forward their own destruction. They brought forward their own destruction. It was coming their way, but this helped Joshua. Instead of fighting individual nations, here they are in one place. You destroy them all at once, and then you don't have to go into each and every single city or each and every single country and fight them. So this is what happened. So God assured Joshua, who launched a surprise attack. Joshua, from the way I'm looking at it, Joshua was good at launching surprise attacks, and it works quite well for him. Militarily, that's the best way to do to fight a war. There should always be an element of surprise to subdue your enemy. And I'll just give one example. It took France. France was a very, very strong country. To this day, it is 2 weeks to be conquered by Hitler in 1941. No, 1940. Simply because France and Germany are neighbors. So France built a big wall. They call it the Maginot Line. So in case Hitler tries to invade France, he should not be even able to cross over to the French inside France because it was heavily fortified. Hitler came up with a clever idea that instead of launching a frontal attack, he went through Belgium and Netherlands, conquered Belgium and Netherlands. Now, on the other side, the boundary between Belgium and Netherlands, it was not fortified. And that was where the weakness of France was. And the French were told about that, but they thought that there's a big forest in that place between France and Belgium. It's called the Ardennes forest. It is, they say, the military experts thought that it's impenetrable. Nothing can move there. Not the tanks, nothing. But the Germans, Hitler said to them, make sure that you go through that because the attack, the frontal attack crossing France is going to be very, very expensive and we might not even be able to make it. So they made plans. They came through that route, which was thought to be impenetrable. It took France 2 weeks to succumb to the Germans. They had no idea what hit them. That's why the World War II or Hitler's armies They always said they were fighting a blitzkrieg or a lightning war. They were so quick that within a short space of time, they were already right in the middle of France. And the French didn't know what hit them. So Joshua was also relying a lot on a surprise element. Remember, these armies just got together. They just assembled, and they didn't expect, they were still gonna take a rest. But here was Joshua again, just like what he did to the 5 kings of Canaan, marched all night long. That's a sign of a great military strategist. Didn't give his enemies a chance to regroup. He was just on top of them. Before they knew it, well, we at least we have this thing, the biblical account that tells us that God was with him and all of that. But from a distance, if you take God away from it and all that, it looks like a trademark of a great military strategist. So after God's assurance, Joshua launches a surprise attack against them, all the combined armies of the northern Canaanites in the waters of Meron, where they were still resting, and he utterly defeated them. They fled to greater, not Zion, man, Zidon. I remember Zidon in Mizpah, but he followed them up. In warfare, they always tell you that once you see that your enemy is on the back foot, just don't relent. Go after him. Just go for a kill. And then he totally annihilated them, hamstrung their horses. By hamstrung, he said we cut the hamstrings of all their horses. You know, the hamstrings are the back muscles of your thigh. So he would go and cut the major veins or whatever of all their horses, and he burned their chariots. So all the cities, that's the biblical account now, Joshua 11, verse 11 to 15. So all the cities of those kings and all their kings, Joshua took and struck them with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed them as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. But as for the cities that stood on the mounts, Israel burned none of them except Hazor only, which Joshua burned. And all the spoil of these cities and the livestock the children of Israel took as a booty for themselves. Remember, most of the time, all the spoil of the cities, the livestock, the children, most of the time, or in Jericho, they were not allowed to take the spoils of war for themselves. But since the battle of Ai, they are allowed to take as much as they can. I think Achan was too hasty and he was too covetous. If he could have waited, he was going to get his fair share as well. But unfortunately, he was greedy. So now look at those who remain behind. They are just benefiting because there's a saying that goes, to the victor, all the spoils, the spoil, to the victor, the spoils, all the spoils of war. So they are getting what they deserve because they have fought hard. Let's continue with the biblical passage. The children of Israel took a booty for themselves, but they struck every man with the edge of the sword until they had destroyed them, and they left none breathing, as the Lord had commanded Moses' servant. So Moses commanded Joshua. So Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did. He left nothing undone at all that the Lord had commanded Moses. Joshua 11, verse 11 to 15. You'll read it on your own. So Joshua took the whole land. This is still from the Bible. I didn't see a need to edit it because it's so beautifully written. It sums up everything. So Joshua took the whole land according to all the Lord has said to Moses, and Joshua gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to their divisions by their tribes. If you go back to what we spoke about in the book of Numbers, it is a well-documented affair as to how they're supposed to go around, divide the land. They say the first, it wasn't according to which tribe was the favorite, but according to the size, the numbers of the tribes, they were going to do what we call a lot, like a sort of a gamble as to who wins, who takes which part, and all that. So God was fair. He didn't say, this part belongs to Judah because it's my favorite tribe, but they were going to cast a lot, and the bigger nation or the bigger tribes were going to be allocated the bigger piece of land. Please, if you've forgotten this, go back to the book of Numbers. Then the land rested from more. Like I've said in the beginning of this presentation, way in the beginning, this took Joshua 6 years to defeat 31 kings of Canaan. So this is the end of the war.